We're here with Mike Abramowitz from betterthanrich.com/90-day plan. And we are here to talk about how to do this elusive problem and get to the solution of buying back our time, right? It's so easy for you to create a business with the best of intentions. And the next thing you know, you've created another job for yourself and you sacrificed that entrepreneurial and time freedom that drew you to entrepreneurship in the first place. So it's time to change course, to take the game back and to get ourselves on a better path. We're talking about delegating. We're talking about systematizing. We're talking about AI and everything that comes up with that, because you hear these buzzwords or you do the learning and you think, I coulda, woulda, shoulda do that or done that someday. And Mike is here to set us straight, to get us on a plan, to break through some of these mental barriers and have us go from I can't do that or I should do that to I will do that, and I'm going to do that with Mike's help. So Mike, glad to be speaking with you.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Robert. Happy to be here and add value where I can.
Yeah, and that's a great mindset to jump into, right? Like they call that servant leadership, right? To add value, to contribute, and we hyped you up a little bit, but in your own words, what are you all about? What gets you excited and motivated? What's your current focus?
Current focus is helping entrepreneurs, if they have a business and they have a family and they're high earning, is to help them buy back their time so they could reinvest the time to what matters most to them. The short of it is I was in the hospital with my son for 8.5 months when he was born at 1 pound, 4 ounces. And my business was able to run without me for those 8.5 months and still produce 6 figures in profits and revenue without me there. And then my wife had to leave her corporate job, become a full-time medical mom. And because of that, I was able to have the time freedom to pursue a second career. And that second career is now helping busy, overwhelmed entrepreneurs do what I did, which is to create predictability in my business and install systems and automation and proper team and tech and offshore virtual assistants in order to help me buy back my time. So it's through circumstance, I've been able to learn. And now I'm in a position to teach now that my son is doing great. He's thriving. And we just welcomed our daughter into the world as well. So my son is 3, my newborn is 4 months old. So it's fun to be at this chapter of life. Yeah.
Right, where you're at the beginning and there's so much potential, but you've already accomplished so much. And I love your story here because the mediocre land is scary, right? Doing just enough and just limping along. And then sometimes it takes being hit with some kind of stress, conflict, adversity to say, hey, now this is the time for me to really man up and maybe do what I would have, should have done years ago and do this thing like systematizing. And so, what you mentioned and a little bit in there, what's involved. So you're saying that we need to make these systems and hire these people and delegate. But it seems like, a lot can go wrong with that, right? And it's sometimes easier said than done because it's easy enough to say, oh, I should just, create some automations. But what holds people back from getting this done? Is it not having a plan, not having urgency, not having help, all of the above? Like, why is this not just snap your fingers and it's done?
It's a good question. I think there's several pieces to kind of unpack here. And the first reason is the business owner needs to know what their priorities are and what the reason is they're running a business in the first place. And the way I define a business is a vehicle. A business is a vehicle to help me pursue my life. It is not my life. In my 20s, my business was my life. I was running a direct sales organization with Cutco and Vector, and I was grinding 24/7. So people say they had a 9 to 5. I had a 24/7. So I was working constantly, and wasn't able to let go of control. Not that I didn't trust my staff, but I didn't let go of control of things because I knew I could do it better than them. So when I hired my business coach in 2016 to help me learn how to remove myself as a bottleneck from my business, that's where I really started poking around and asking some of the deeper questions, like what's the purpose of me running a business in the first place? And my answer to that was I wanted to create a predictable machine that produces predictable revenue that also buys me time freedom. The revenue from that business can then be invested in a passive investment stream. So that money makes me money. The business buys me back time. And that way I could have 3x freedom on the other end. So I can spend my time on what matters most and leveraging that business to be a force for good for myself and others. So it's like I had to get clear of what that means for me. And I think that's a great place to start. So that way, when a business owner is saying, oh, I'm the only person who could do something that they fall into a trap, this control trap that I was in, where it's like I'm the best person to do everything, which is probably true. But Dan Martell says in his book, 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome. So what I would suggest is getting very, very clear of what are the things that are in your genius that only you can do, that brings you energy. And then what are all the things that can get offloaded that other people could do maybe 80% as good as you, but allows you to buy back your time so you could spend that time on what matters most to you. So I have what is called the time rich 6 that I created for myself that has kind of helped me and has helped some of our students inside of our community. I could walk through that if you think it could be appropriate.
Yeah, let's do that. So give me a moment to kind of like digest what you said and think about this, because I like the way that you phrased it, because this is like the ultimate entrepreneurial nut to crack, right? Is this kind of the arrogance of that no one else can do it as well as me. And you're saying like maybe that's true, but can someone do it 80% as well as you, or can someone do it more consistently, or can is there something that you're good at but you just don't like to do, or someone else could do it, and that will free up for you to focus on, like you said, your zone of genius, but also even within the zone of genius, that overlap of what also gives you energy. So this is wonderful to think about, and just in the way that you phrase it, it's like, well, of course we're holding ourselves back, right? Of course we're having the bottleneck, letting the emotion, ego get in the way. So let's bust through that. Tell us about this 6-step component.
It's great. So the time rich 6, I'll give the overview. Number 1 is boundaries. Number 2 is communication guidelines. Number 3, systems. Number 4, playbooks. Number 5, team. And number 6, tech. So these are the 6 items that worked for me. And I didn't know this was the curriculum that I followed, but now that I have gone through it, this is what helps. So number 1 is boundaries. So boundaries, what am I protecting? What are my priorities? What are the things that matter most to me? What am I running this business for? For me, it was to be a family man with a business, not a businessman with a family. I wanted to be a present husband and a present father. So I didn't want to have to say no to a lot of things that my dad said no to me because he was grinding and ambitious in his business, running a plumbing business. I just wanted that different for myself. So I wanted to create a schedule where I could work in my business 9 to 4, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9 to 2 on Friday, have evenings and mornings off, Saturday and Sunday with the family, and a personal day on Monday. And that's what I'm living now. But I had the intention 10 years ago to build a business that eventually I could get to that point. So knowing what the priorities are, knowing what the boundaries are to protect that time. So that way, when someone crosses out of bounds, they call me at 10 o'clock at night, or they contact me on my personal day, or reach out on a weekend, I could let them know, hey, you're out of bounds, which ties into number 2, which is communication guidelines. How do I want it? What deems a text versus a live call versus an email versus a Zoom call? How do I want people to communicate with me? When I ran my direct sales business, everyone had my personal cell phone. I had 1,000 clients who bought Cutco from me. I had new recruits that wanted to work for me. And then I had my current team who worked for me. All of those people, and I trained 5,000 people to sell just under $20 million worth of product line. So it was a pretty large organization. I had a lot of people wanting to get my attention. So of course, I was the bottleneck. So I had to restructure how to remove myself as the bottleneck by installing a cloud phone number, by installing internal communication chats with WhatsApp, with virtual assistants inside of those channels, how to install a virtual assistant that manages my inbox. So when clients have requests, there's a buffer between me and my client. So by putting this infrastructure in place allowed me to have explicit communication guidelines that are protecting my boundaries, which leads into number 3, which is systems. What are systems? Systems are, we define it at Better Than Rich as a series of processes, policies, and technologies that aid in the goal of the business. What is a process? A series of if-then statements. So in the 4 pillars of business, attract, convert, onboard, retain, for the talent journey and the client journey, attracting new talents, attracting new clients, converting that, whether it be sales or the hiring process, onboarding them, and then retaining them, client maximization or talent retention. What are all the if-thens and all the predictability, like Michael Gerber's E-Myth? How could we create series of if-thens that are very predictable inside the system for every user inside of that system? So that's number 3, which is systems. So boundaries, then communication guidelines, then systems. I can stop there for just a moment to come up for some air, just in case you want to interject. And then I could do the next 3, which is playbooks, team, and tech. But obviously, this is something that's super relevant to me, and I hope it's relevant to your audience. I don't want to just preach because I want to add value, like I mentioned.
Right, and it is good to take a slight break and have give us a little bit of a suspense and give you a little like a few moments to rest here. And I love how it's you seem like you're introspective and you've thought this through and you've written some of this down, and that you're also in the pursuit of simplicity, because you could have easily said, "Oh, here's this 25-point plan," but you're also saying, "Hey, when we say boundaries, here's what I mean. Here's my schedule. When I say systems, I mean, here's what I mean. It's these if then statements." So I think I find that just very helpful in general, that you said, well, here's what the definition is, right? Here, when I say system, here's what I mean. And so I find that very helpful. And so yeah, so we're thinking about this. So all right, so to recap, you said that the first three are what, boundaries and what else?
Communication guidelines,
Communication guidelines
and
and
then systems.
and then systems. All right. So boundaries, communication guidelines, and systems. And then on the back half, now what are the final three? What does this lead to?
So then once you have these systems, you have these if thens, right? All right. Like I McDonaldified my business. If a client wants to get my attention and needs a resource, then they email me and ask me for that resource as an example, or I must have a resource library that exists, right? That's what I mean by the if then. So therefore the playbooks are like the documentation of those resources. So there might be 100 plus playbooks, SOPs, you could call them, standard operating procedures, that are inside of that system. So the system is like, if you think about it, like the X's and O's, the playbooks are the actual like plays that we're calling. Like we're actually running these plays, and it's the documentation in one organized place. So that way it's very predictable. It's very simple to follow. There might be a playbook for lead nurturing. There's a playbook for how to get on podcasts. There's a SOP and a playbook for managing my inbox. There's a SOP and a playbook for social media content creation, for how to send a certain email to the certain type of client, internal communication channels created, like SOPs for everything, learning management softwares. I mean, every single thing, part of the business ideally has some sort of playbook. Why? Because we want to create a system and predictability. So that way, if a talent leaves their position, if they move on, it's documented. So it's very easy to drop and reload. So it's not reliant on the owner to then go step in and do a lot of work. I would rather have this done and predictable, so it's an easy drop and reload. I'll give you an example, Robert. My wife and I took a 3-week road trip in 2020 before our son was born, and we did $100,000 in sales. We crushed it. We provided 1,000 jobs during COVID because we were equipped here to run a virtual business. And during that week, while I was on my road trip, one staff member quit. I had systems and processes and documentation in place where it was drop in, reload. The next person stepped up. They followed the documentation from that person's position, and we didn't skip a beat. And we did another week of $100,000 in sales without skipping any type of beat, requiring me at all, other than one quick 5-minute conversation of welcoming them into their new role, letting them know, hey, your compensation structure is going to be this. You need to step into your role. These are the expectations. Are there any questions? Cool. Go through our virtual library of videos that are already documented, go through it, and then you're going to direct report to this person as your senior leader. Is that all pretty clear? Okay, great. I'll follow up with you when I get back. And that person stepped in the role, got their training, was all predictable and done. And all because I premeditated it, doing this time-rich 6, working on the business, versus me constantly doing the thing inside the business. And that runs into number 5, which is team. Who are the who's that are going to be calling the plays? I don't want to be the coach that's also playing as quarterback, that's also being the kicker, that's also being the running back, right? The coach isn't going into the game to run the plays. The coach is calling the plays. And then there's other who's that are actually running those plays. And I think that's really important for administrative, for marketing, for sales, for client fulfillment. So different who's, there's experts like been there, done that's, and then there's followers. And how detailed and dialed in those systems and playbooks are determines the level of talent that you're going to need to pay. So if you have very simple systems, McDonaldified your business, you could pay $25 an hour or less for someone to step in. If you're not very organized, then you need a been there, done that you're going to have to pay $75 an hour too. So depending on how organized and simplified your business is going to determine what type of who you're going to need to install into the business. And then number 6 is the technology. What type of tech solutions are going to support those who's? What is your CRM? What is your, what is your project management software, your learning management software? What is your internal communication channel? And most importantly, in my opinion, is how do you use AI? How is AI being used by those who's to create predictability and have an excellent user experience that's consistent with your writing style, with your tone, with your brand ethos, with you fill in the blank, just to make things effective and efficient. So those are the 6: boundaries, communication guidelines, systems, playbooks, team, and then tech.
Very nice. And so this is great to kind of get into your brain here and to find out how your business is run, because it's way too easy to get stuck in academic land, right? And or to focus on just one little area. So it's great to kind of get the whole overview of all these different parts of it. And what I like especially is how there's the systems and the playbooks, right? Because it's really easy to say like, okay, well, we'll hire this person and we'll figure it out. But then when you lose the person, then you have to sort of start from scratch. And then when there's like the over reliance on the systems there, it might not be very well documented. And then you have this black box, right? You have all these things happening. And then you're like, well, I'm afraid to even improve the system or mess with it because I don't have that kind of other layer of the documentation. And so just hearing about this, kind of like thinking in like objection mode, it seems like there's a lot to be written down, like when you mentioned like hundreds of SOPs, and then you might say, well, that's kind of necessary, right, to account for all the kind of account for life happening. But is there ever an element of like sometimes like tearing down the system or updating it, like updating the videos or the software or the process, like if it becomes like
Sure.
a few years out of date? Is there this aspect of like improving or recreating?
Absolutely. And we call that the 5 Ds of systemization inside of Better Than Rich. The first D of design. So we design the if thens. Once we design the if thens, then we document those if thens. That's essentially the playbook. So then we document the if thens. Once we document it, then we disseminate. We train on those if thens. So we're training those who's. Once we train those who's, then we're going to defend the system. So we want to defend the system. Essentially, that's the accountability. That's where, how are you tracking your KPIs? What's working, what's not working? And then once we see what's working and not working, then we develop a new system or an upgraded system in order to design the next version of what we need to do. And those are the 5 Ds of systemization. So absolutely, they're just like an iPhone. We're on iPhone 56, right? Because it's this constant evolution of those 5 Ds, which is design, then documentation, then dissemination, which is training, and then defending, which is the KPIs, and then develop, which is where can we make upgrades because some things are inefficient. So it's a great question, and that's how we have found what we have found most business owners do not choose to do is because they don't have those boundaries, they can't separate themselves from working in the business because they're too busy doing the thing that they don't separate from working on the business to be able to have these conversations with themselves, for them to step back and say, why is this inefficient, or where is this inefficient? Let me look at these KPIs. Let me look at these internal communications. Let me look at a traffic light report. What is a traffic light report? Red, green, and yellow for each person on my talent journey and each client in my pipeline. Where are they at? Where are the reds? Well, why are they red? Where are the greens? Why are they green? How could we get referrals from those greens? How could we make the reds better, create a better user experience? If the owner is not having that type of conversation with themselves because they're not creating boundaries to work on the business because they're so busy working in the business, that's the challenge at scalability for the business, but it's also the challenge with buying back some time and having some level of time freedom to separate themselves. It is a process, it is a discipline, and frankly, I think this is why I do what I do. This is why it's important for someone to say, "Man, I love what I do and I am working a lot. Like I am constantly needed. Great. Good job. And let's stop that stuff." Right? Like, you don't need to be needed all the time. Let's create some predictability that can run without you there.
Wonderful. And yeah, and this is what we all need, right? We need to get that fulfillment, that excitement from doing what we do best, but without the time busyness. And what I like about this is it's like, okay, the first step here is boundaries, so that way you can get yourself on that path to becoming clear of like, what should I do and what shouldn't I do? And then when you figure out this abstractedness, figure out the KPIs, the traffic light reports, then it seems like it opens up new ways of thinking, right? Because like you're saying, like, okay, well, the green lights, how can we get referrals from there? You might not even have had that line of thought if you were so busy putting out the fires or doing the 24/7 job, like you mentioned at the beginning. So,
Right.
so I can imagine that people need to be woken up about this. They need to see that there's a better way, but they might not be able to do it on their own, right? And you might think, well, if they could do it, they would have done it already, right? And it takes for sure a certain type of brain to figure out some of this stuff, right? To get excited and energized about the if then statements or about the SOPs. And so if someone says, okay, like you've given me a lot to chew on and you've given me like these cool lists and these cool concepts and you've kind of woken me up to where I might be going wrong, how can someone reach out to you and get some help? Like, what are the resources? Is the best path like a book, a coaching call, a course? Like, how can someone get the help they need from you and your team?
Number one is offload the bottom 20%. All that administrative that is just not needed by the owner. Social media, inbox management, video production, graphic images, and anything that is administrative related, CRM management, all of that stuff. And that's why what we have is we have an agency. We will install a team of virtual assistants into someone's business that are powered by AI to handle all of that for them. We have a team of 35 to 40 individuals. They all who do work for me. So they're all trained on how to do this stuff for me and my business. And we will install them into your business. So that's our one of our services that we provide, if that could be of value to someone. But in order to really help them figure out what are those bottom 20%, maybe we can help, maybe we can't. I'm doing a free 90-day delegation planning session with them with a time audit workbook that can help them figure out what are those bottom 20% tasks for their business specifically that are energy draining, that are below their target dollar per hour. We'll reveal that in about 30 or 40 minutes together. And on the other end, once that's revealed, get those offloaded during the next 90 days so you can buy back that amount of time. And I would bet you're spending 10 hours a week at least. If I could help you buy back 40 hours a week or 40 hours a month during the next 90 days, now we could take those 40 hours a month to work on the business so you can work a little bit more in higher value activities. And they could do that betterthanrich.com/90-day plan, 90-day plan, and book that conversation. It goes directly to me, betterthanrich.com/90-day plan. And if our services can help, I would love to have them use our service, but maybe our service isn't a good fit for them. I'd love to at least have the conversation if it makes sense for them to figure out what those bottom tasks might be.
I love that. Yes, it's worth at least having that conversation to have that curiosity and figure out what could be done. Either, like you said, the kind of the customized solution, or just get that bottom 20% out of the way. And you mentioned a few times about, I'm not sure what the metaphor is, but kind of like an upward snowball, so to speak, right? You free up 10 hours a week there, and then now that's 10 hours you can put towards something else. You could put towards family time, refresh, recharge better, get some better insights, get to the networking, the joint venturing, that passion project you already did. And then, and as you and I both know, Mike, it's kind of a struggle to get those first couple of hires, but when you do, it's kind of addicting, right? When you see like, oh man, didn't have to think about this got done magically. Now I don't have to be a control freak in this way. It can be a very upward climb to getting other people to handle the business. So that way you get this predictability that you mentioned. That way you have this consistent machine. You have less stress. You have something that you can then sell or keep if you want. It opens up many possibilities that just aren't there if you're the sole operator, or if everything is just like, running around you. And so betterthanrich.com/90-day plan is the way to claim that Zoom session and have that conversation with Mike, just to get some of this stuff figured out. And this might have been on your mind for months, if not years, and you've heard about people, including Mike, who have crossed that chasm, who have figured out how to buy back their time, as he says, and you owe it to yourself to go to betterthanrich.com/90-day plan and sign up for this. And as we're wrapping up our conversation here, Mike, since it's a podcast, it's always fun to end on one final little soundbite, right? Like a fun quote or lesson that has helped you or can help us. So what comes to your mind when I ask you for a quote or lesson?
A lesson is know what season you're in. So are you in the winter season of unpredictability where you're, fighting a fight right now? If you are, create a minimum viable product so you have the least amount of consequences when spring comes around. If it's a spring season, you're planting seeds. Make sure you're planting the appropriate seeds. If you want an apple tree in the fall, make sure you're planting apple seeds for your type of business that you want. If you're in a summer season, you're grinding and you're working, make sure you keep your head down on one thing that is your revenue driver, not trying to tackle multiple things at once. And if you're in a fall season, reap the rewards, enjoy the harvest while also taking time for strategy and also preparation. So that way, when that next winter unpredictable season comes, you have enough resources and enough energy to weather that storm. So know what season you're in and make sure you're navigating with the appropriate strategy depending on what season you're in.
Very nice, very helpful. You sure delivered on that for a soundbite, Mike. And so betterthanrich.com/90-day plan to talk to this guy. And you can just tell from his teaching here and the storytelling that he's done it, he's seen it, he can, and he will help you. And your job now is to go to betterthanrich.com/90-day plan. Go there, claim a time slot, talk with Mike. You'll be glad that you did. And wonderful speaking with you today, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Robert.
All right, super.